Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another edition of Ask Dr. Dansinger. We're Dr. Michael Dansinger, diabetesreversalpartners.com, world renowned diabetes reversal expert. If you are in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New York, Minnesota, Virginia, or Florida, you can take advantage of his services. They're covered under Medicare and Medicare PPO plans. But today we're going to be talking about the new food pyramid and some of the marketing ploys that you want to be careful of that are coming out of this brand new pyramid, especially when it comes to proteins. Dr. Danziger, any quick notes before we get into? I've gotten more than a dozen questions that have come in about this, as well as a post by an influencer, Dr. Mark Hyman. So we're going to get to all that coming up. But any opening thoughts?
It's a great topic. Protein is a hot, complex, divisive topic, so let's get into it.
Okay, Sarah M., how much protein does a food actually need to have before high protein means anything? And isn't this just marketing? I love that. Such a good question. What does high protein mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not even 100% sure what high protein means, and you can define it in different ways. I think a food can call themselves high protein if maybe 25% of the calories are coming from protein, something like that, or maybe has 10 grams of protein in it. These are arbitrary thresholds. And I think something to keep in mind is, protein is much more prominent now in the food pyramid than it ever has before, which is highly controversial. But you can bet that if you were a company that has a food that has some protein in it, all their marketing experts are going to say, let's figure out how to leverage the new dietary advice to our advantage, which is going to create all sorts of complexities and confusion for consumers and patients and on the online marketing, etc. So we'll
Yeah,
we'll
I think a
spend a
good
whole
baseline
session
really,
talking about that.
yeah, I think a good baseline is, how much protein should you have in your diet? And what's just a guideline? And then people can kind of go back and go, okay, I can see how much protein is in this and that. And maybe I understand what high protein means to me in my situation.
Okay, so I'll give you a short answer and a longer answer to that
Okay.
question. How much protein do I need? And so, first of all, there's a lot of debate about that, but so the body has a very wide tolerance range for how much protein you're getting. But if you want to count your grams of protein, a good rule of thumb is that you can take your body weight in pounds and divide that in half and eat that many grams. If you weigh 200 pounds and you divide that in half, that's 100 grams of protein. If you weigh 140 pounds, you can cut that in half. That's 70 and call that 70 grams a day. So I think that's a good rule of thumb is take your weight in pounds, divide it in half, and you can eat that many, aim for that many grams of protein. If you're a bodybuilder, you can push it higher, and if you want, you can push it lower, but it's a good middle of the road um, guideline.
Okay, Jason R. If two foods both say high protein, what should I look for on the label to decide which one may be better for me?
It's a great question. It's like so the to exaggerate the point I would like to make is like which brand of poison is worse for me. So be careful that if your protein has a label on it, you might not even be eating something that's healthy. So there's all sorts of different versions of protein foods in wrappers, some healthier than others. So you look for things that don't have a lot of added sugars and a bunch of other stuff in them. And so an example would be turkey jerky is out there, and there's all sorts of turkey jerkies out there. And if you can find something that's pretty close to minimally processed. That would be much better than one that has a whole bunch of sugar and other fillers in there. So that's just one of hundreds of examples. So it's a great question. There's no hard and fast rules, but be very. I'm concerned that almost any protein product is something that's too far away from the types of proteins that we should really be eating.
And we are joined actually by our new diabetic educator. Excited to have her here. I've been wanting you to meet her. Her name is Jean, and she's in New York. And go ahead and ask your question, Jean.
Hi, doctor. Thank you for having me. I took the day off, so
Hi,
I'm
Jean.
really excited to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
My question for you is a podiatrist. I don't really deal with, like protein and renal, but my concern is with the renal patients. Do we have to be still careful about the amount of protein they're ingesting? Because, like, I remember when I was in residency, they were saying limit the protein. So with this food pyramid, we seem to be emphasizing more protein.
And
Yeah,
before he answers, it's interesting because I asked Dr. Lily Johnston the same question. She's our vascular surgeon that does a show for us called Next Gen MD. And I actually said exactly the same thing as you, Jean. And she refuted me publicly. And she said there's new evidence that shows that it's not as much of a concern as people once thought. So I'm, and then she sent me a study on it. So I'm
yeah.
curious just from Dr. Dansinger's perspective as well.
Okay, so what we're talking about here is if you have kidney disease, do you still have to be careful about protein? And so the answer is yes. There is a such thing as too much protein in a patient who has kidney disease. So people with kidney disease, especially if they're leaking protein into the urine, which you can measure, these patients with abnormal kidney function do not handle dietary protein as well as people who have normal kidneys. And um, I've looked at the research that you've sent along, Kim, and I've been thinking about it all week. And so, what we need is a more nuanced answer than what the one I just gave. But the answer that I gave is still the best answer. Is that yes, we need to be concerned. It needs to be personalized with your kidneys, your nephrologist, kidney specialist. And so, yes. When patients have stage 3, stage 4, stage 5 kidney disease, there is a such thing as too much protein. Animal protein is more problematic than vegetarian protein. So from beans and tofu, etc., is gentler on the kidneys. And then people who are malnourished and underweight can probably benefit from a little bit more protein in terms of their longevity. So the kidney is not the only thing that's an issue in a patient with kidney disease.
And Linda T, she says, can a product be high in protein but still contribute to inflammation or blood sugar problems? And you were alluding to this a little bit earlier to check the ingredients.
Yeah, absolutely. So just because of protein, I think even a even a middle school student would be able to recognize that just because something says high protein on the label doesn't mean it's healthy necessarily. And so yes, the um, so we'll probably be seeing more and more foods that say high protein on it, but those foods can be filled with sugars and additives and emulsifiers and all sorts of stuff in there that's not really ideal for the human diet. We should be eating whole foods that have one ingredient whenever possible.
I think that you answered the next one from Mark D, where he asks, so why do protein bars and shakes often have such long ingredient lists if protein is just supposed to be simple? So if do you have anything further to add, or should we go on to the next one?
Well, there's no protein bars that I'm particularly excited about. Nothing that I could say that I would ever recommend to someone when you're having a protein bar. What I like about it is it's convenient, right? It can bring it with you on the airplane and travel, and it might be better than something else you might eat. And so whenever you're having a protein bar, what you're doing is sort of navigating the middle ground. And it's because you don't have something healthier to eat, but it's better than a candy bar in most cases. And there's different sorts of protein bars, and so they're all a mixed bag. If I was going to give them a letter grade, it would probably go somewhere between D and B plus.
Wow. Well, Angela P wants to know, is protein from isolates and powders processed differently in the body than protein from whole foods like meat, eggs, fish, or nuts?
So great question. It's a complicated, sophisticated question. I think the short answer is yes. They're processed by the body differently, but you could also say no, they're not processed by the body differently. And so, when we eat foods, it all gets broken down into kind of a soup in our stomach that gets absorbed by the small intestine. And these protein in the stomach all breaks down into amino acids. And when we eat, protein isolate, it breaks down to amino acids. So on the one hand, you could say, well, it all gets broken down. But but on the other hand, when you're eating, like protein shakes, it's not the same as if you had that same kind of food from natural whole foods, because the intestinal bacteria see it different, are absorbing it differently. Your stomach empties at a different rate, and so it's not identical. The So it's a complex question. Protein. I like protein powders. Protein powders often have these protein isolates, like whey protein isolate, for example, and protein shakes can do a good job when you're using them to replace unhealthy meals. But is it as good as whole foods? I don't think so. So it's a great question. Sorry for the convoluted answer.
Oh, you're always thorough. I love it. And I mentioned in the beginning that an influencer, Mark Hyman, Dr. Mark Hyman, posted about his beef with lab produced beef, protein bars, shakes, and electrolyte drinks as all being healthy. And he really called them out on Instagram as well as LinkedIn. So we had a couple questions that have come in because of that. So we have Robert K, who wants to understand why electrolyte drinks are marketed as healthy when many of them are full of sugar, dyes, and additives.
Yes. So Gatorade and Powerade are examples of these electrolyte drinks. There's some sugar in them, and then there's pretty colors. And these are tasty drinks that are probably not as outrageous to drink as, let's say, soda. But on the other hand, it's not as good as water. So it's one of these middle grounds between healthy and unhealthy. I'm not a fan of these electrolyte drinks like the ones I mentioned. You're better off having water. You don't need what's in them. If you read the bottle, you might think this is going to help me become a better athlete or be healthy for me, but it's not. And you just need water and whole food. That's all you need. If you're running a marathon, if you're literally running a marathon, it's a different story. But short of that, you probably are better off just with water.
So with all of these, Tina L is asking, so what ingredients really draw red flags for you again and again in these ultra processed foods that make you immediately cautious?
Yeah. Well, so sugar comes in all sorts of different forms, so that's a concern. And then refined processed starch. So if you know, and so ground up, refined, things like flour, um, corn, used as not a vegetable but as a ingredient that's starchy. Um, a lot of oils, industrial oils. So, and then the longer the list, the worse it is. So lots of salt, lots of sugar, lots of refined starch, lots of calories from oil. All those are concerns.
Okay, so Nancy, do you have a question for Dr. Dansinger?
Well, mine's not about food so much. I'm just wondering, how do you deal with stress? How much is stress affecting our diabetes? And, you know, I went for a 45-minute walk today at the gym. So that's my way of dealing with some of my stress. But just wondering, because there's a lot of stress going on in the world right now.
Great question about stress. So stress is not good for health because it causes, a spike in the hormone cortisol and other hormones, and it leads people to eat for comfort. So we all have certain foods that are comforting, and if I for some people, watching the news can be really unsettling,
Yeah, I
and
turned it off.
I want them to put positive things on the news, not things that are divisive, driving Americans apart rather than together. I want positivity rather than negativity. And so, um, source comes from all sorts of places,
Yeah.
and you can't. So, what you do have control over is not what's happening in the world, but how you react to it and how much of
Hmm.
your time you pay to it.
Hmm.
I never watch the news, and I really focus my energies on things that I can control.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of research studies that show that the people who are living in communities that are stressed out have
Hmm.
higher rates of heart disease and diabetes and related
Hmm.
conditions. And so some people just avoid focus on things they can control. Some people surround themselves with positive people who are upbeat and positive. Some
Hmm.
people use meditation.
Hmm.
Some people um, recognize that they need to focus away from things that they cannot control. So, traffic is a great example of something that can be stressful, right? You know that when you go out driving at rush hour, there's going to be stressful traffic, and you can just already decide in advance that it's going to be stressful, and then just decide not to get stressed out about it because you can't control it. It's a given, and so that's just one of many examples where you already know that the environment is stressful, and you can either focus, on things, not focus on things you can't control. That's a great question. Thank you for asking it.
Yeah, I think that goes along with everything. And I think it's something we should address in every single one of our episodes because it comes up so often. And I will get back to, the questions that we had come in earlier, but we do have Douglas here in our live studio audience as well that wants to ask you if you've heard of an app. So go ahead, Douglas.
Great to see you again. Yes, I have. So when you're standing there buying groceries and you're trying to understand all the labels, what's good for you, what's not bad for you, and you almost have to be as smart as you, which will never be, but to understand the labels. But I was given an app called UYKA, and what it does is read the label and tells you all the negative things about what that label actually doesn't say. Does that make sense?
I've never heard of that app, and I think there's many of them like that, and there's all sorts of so yes, I think it makes sense to have a guide or a system to help you figure out what's healthy or not healthy. Um, some people would just say the number of ingredients is a good starting point, but it's more complicated than that. So
Right, because it's like
maybe that
trying to
app.
watch my sodium.
Yeah.
So I have to watch my sodium, is what I told. So it's like trying to figure out between that and protein and everything. And now the new food pyramid, I'm trying to figure out how to change my eating habits. So they sent me this app, and I was just wondering if you ever thought what you thought about those kind of apps.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going back to just some other questions that came in earlier in regards to the marketing ploys that are out there and what we're seeing since the food pyramid was out. And Dr. Mark Hyman putting out some information, his concerns about some of the different processed foods out there. And based on that, Brian H is asking, if a food is fortified with vitamins, does that mean it's healthy or it's just more processing? Or how do you know if it's good or bad for you?
Okay, great question. So vitamins, there's lots of vitamins. They can be added to foods, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to add vitamins to food. And for you know, as a public health effort, it was helpful decades ago to add vitamins like B12 and um, minerals, etc. And that hasn't necessarily been a bad thing. But what is a bad thing is when companies are marketing their unhealthy foods to us by trying to trick us into thinking it's because we need our to get vitamins because by eating that. So for example, if you took a candy bar, an unhealthy candy bar, and you put some you know vitamin C in it, it's not going to transform it into a healthy food. You can extend that idea all over the place. So it's a great question. Don't get fooled into thinking something's healthy just because it's fortified. In fact, if a food has a label on it with a bunch of ingredients, assume that it's not healthy until proven otherwise.
And the next question really is where my concern lies with the new food pyramid and the companies doing, what you said, which is just makes sense that if the food pyramid prioritizes protein, well, everyone's going to focus on their protein. Hey, we're high in protein.
Right.
But Melissa A brings up a very important point as to where the previous food pyramid and such were abused. And she asks, are low fat and and sugar free foods actually worse because of what's added to replace the fat and the sugar?
Yeah, it's a important question. It's very hard to
Hey,
answer.
Oreos are now gluten-free and
Yeah.
sugar-free. You know that, right?
So
So I can eat them, right?
if I answered the question with a yes or a no to the question that came in, then I could be criticized because just because something's lower in fat might mean it's higher in sugar, or just because. So here's again, it comes down to don't get tricked into eating foods that are marketed. If a food is marketed, it's almost certainly unhealthy, right? We don't see a lot of marketing for. I mean, that's we don't see a lot of marketing for apples or oranges or um, you know this, that, and the other thing. I want people eating foods with like one ingredient and using those foods to make healthy meals. So whole foods is really what you're looking for. And then, we're all concerned about these highly processed foods. And so if we're wondering, so I do recommend the low fat version of dairy products. So I favor low fat milk over whole milk. Because animal fat from meat and dairy does clog the arteries. And so when it comes to that type of low fat, reducing fat from meat and dairy is a good thing, but it depends, on a highly processed product. You're just, six of one, half dozen of the other.
Okay, this is my favorite from Dr. Mark Hyman. He is so upset with these lab based meats that are out there. So I've been told, Heather, this is Heather speaking. I've been told plant-based meats like Beyond Burger are healthier than real meat because meat is processed. Is that as well? Is that true?
So if these plant-based meats like Beyond Burger, Impossible Burger have pluses and minuses. I'm not going to say they're bad, and I'm not going to say they're good. I think for vegetarians who are looking for something meaty, that it's a nice product to have available, and those products are getting better. They used to use a lot of saturated fat from
Yeah, they
coconut.
use a lot of refined oils and
Yes.
additives and
Yeah, yeah.
colors and
So I think
flavorings
they're
and stuff.
going in the right direction. For example, using avocado oil instead of as much, say, coconut oil. Um, these things. So I'm, overall, I'm going to give them a grade of about a B, and they could be better, could be worse. What I do favor over those for non-vegetarian, for meat eaters like most Americans, is to have lean meat. So whether it's red meat or poultry or fish, fish and shellfish is terrific, and lean poultry, I think is a better choice than the dark meat. And then lean red meat, whether it's pork or beef, make sure it's lean. And I think those are um, more favorable. And so I'm not going to say just because the word processed is tricky here. So I would say I would favor these lean versions of animal products over the the vegetable the plant based meats. But if we're talking about health of the planet, these beef substitutes are definitely less of a carbon footprint than beef. But that's a whole nother episode, and I think we spent a whole episode on that. And then we're getting into political stuff. So just from a nutritional standpoint, be careful about the saturated fats.
Yeah. And you prefer, I mean, for vegetarians anyway, you prefer, the tofu, the tempeh,
Tofu, beans,
nuts, higher protein vegetables, things like that to get the protein.
yes.
But we did have a last minute question that came in because olive oil is definitely one of those that it's so frustrating when you see, oh, the commercials, my olive oil, the canola oil, it's heart healthy. My vegetable oil is heart healthy, but it's sitting on these store shelves for long periods of time and they're rancid. And we've talked about this over and over again. I'm going to tell you the amphoranueva.com/Marin. They have been proven 3 years straight, tested by UCLA, UC Davis for their numbers, the polyphenol and other antioxidant content in there, that they have been proven to have the healthiest olive oil in the world. And they do test it. amphoranueva.com/Marin. But you want hand-picked, cold pressed, extra virgin olive oil, first harvest or early harvest. It's really important to make sure there's a date on there as to when it was harvested and when it was processed. So that's really important. But Cheryl wants to know, she says, I'm interested in the top 5 cooking oils that she recommends, or he recommends, maybe ranked from best to least. I use mostly pressed olive oil, even for stir fry, but there's also avocado, coconut, safflower, and seed oils. Um, she wants your take on those. And you can make sure, if with the olive oil in particular, you can get high smoke point olive oil. So you have to look for that.
It's a great question. You'll get a different answer from every expert. So
Yep.
olive oil's at the top. I like avocado oil number 2, and the rest after that, I lose enthusiasm for oils after those two. I think that olive and avocado oil are suitable for just about any kind of cooking need. And I am not a big fan of using coconut oil, even though it's natural, it's filled with saturated fats. And so I cannot get enthusiastic about coconut oil. Many others would disagree. It's a very controversial oil. Canola oil, we've had lots of conversations about that. That's also a very divisive, controversial oil. And so that's another topic for another time. We've talked about canola oil quite a bit. I am not a fan of corn oil. I'm not a fan of soybean oil. Just go with high quality olive oil. And if you need something with an even higher smoke point, you can use avocado oil.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Dansinger. We really appreciate you being here. We're here every single Monday with Dr. Dansinger generously volunteering his time with office hours, 30 minutes every single Monday, 3 to 3:30 Eastern Time, 12 to 12:30 Pacific Time, 8 p.m., even for those of you in the UK. So bring your questions every week. It doesn't matter if we repeat ourselves. Everyone comes into this journey at a different time, and no question is stupid. We are here. If you have a question that is going to make a difference in whether or not you can actually follow your diet, follow your doctor's orders to improve your artery health through what you eat, make sure to join us. We're here every single week. And if you want to find out more about the services Dr. Dansinger provides, make sure you do go to diabetesreversalpartners.com. He has coverage for his services. People do not tell you this. In New York, in New Hampshire, in Virginia, in Minnesota, and in Florida. So make sure if you have Medicare or Medicare PPO plans to ask your doctor for referral to diabetesreversalpartners.com. You'll be thankful you did. He's helped so many in our network. Also, don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channels. YouTube.com/the ask, what is it? Michael Dansinger, MD, and then youtube.com/the way to my heart. Thank you so much for everyone joining us. We really appreciate you. Have a great